We are back for another episode of Cody Builds, and we got a lot to get to today, guys. We are going to be prepping the FE block to get it ready to send out to the machine shop. We're going to be doing some oiling modifications, but the first thing I have to do, I've got to get this thing cleaned up. So I've got it sprayed down with degreaser. We're going to hit it with the pressure washer. We're going to get it back in the shop once it's dried up, and we'll get to work. I just got a little garden pump sprayer here that I got filled with degreaser. And the nice part about this is you get a little pressure behind it. Can kind of help you knock some of the crust on this thing off. Man, this is just nasty thick oil buildup. So I'm going to hit this with the degreaser and the brush, try and knock a lot of this loose before we really get working on it, just so we're not making a giant mess in this shop. Whew, it is brutally hot today, guys. That actually felt kind of good doing the pressure washing, getting the mist of the water, but man, it's hot today. We're in this like heat wave of like 97 and 100% humidity. It's just brutal. So trying to stay hydrated today. Block is clean, or much cleaner. It's not perfect, but it's much better than it was. Now, bare surfaces like the cylinder walls and the lifter bores are going to be prone to flash rusting pretty quickly. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take this surface shield, PB Blaster surface shield, and I'm just going to spray that in each of the cylinders, wipe it down with a rag. Same thing with the lifters. Now we are going to be boring this thing out, so it's not that critical, but we don't want to create damage where there is none already. So we just want to prevent some of that flash rusting. So I'm going to do that before I start doing any of the modifications here. I'm not wiping the cylinders out clean. I'm just kind of spreading that oil around so we get a good even coat of that oil all over everything inside the cylinders. Okay, now I want to give credit where credit's due. The modifications and everything you're going to see me do in this video, I picked up from Likens Motorsports on YouTube. If you are in any way interested in building a Ford performance street strip, all just flat out performance engine, go check out Likens Motorsports. He's an awesome resource. Great videos on a number of his engine builds on all different types of Ford engine blocks. So definitely go check out Brent Likens over at Likens Motorsports. I don't know him personally. I've never talked to him, associated with him. I've just watched his YouTube videos and I found them extremely helpful. So a lot of the little tips and tricks I'm picking up are from him. So if you want to go give his videos a watch, I definitely would recommend that. So to get us started, the first thing we're going to do is pull out these press fit plugs. Now there's also one here at the front of the galley, oil galley. It's a clean out there. And then if you come around to the back side, I believe these plugs are typically press fit. So this is more evidence that someone's been in here and working on these, because these are already converted to pipe plugs. So we're just going to convert all these other holes to pipe plugs. There's also one up here behind the inside on the other side of the distributor down in there. We'll be pulling that one as well. So a number of plugs to pull and tap. We're going to do that first. Okay, for this first plug, what I'm going to do, I'm going to go to the center of the plug and I'm going to drill a small hole right in the center of that plug. Once that hole is drilled, I'm going to come back with the screw. We're going to try and run a screw in there. Okay, we got it screwed in. The easier way to do this would be to attach a slide hammer now onto this head and just pop this out with the slide hammer. I don't own a slide hammer, so we are going to attempt to do this with a claw hammer. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to get something to protect my surface here. Let's see, let's just grab a rag to start. We're just going to be very careful in here. We don't want to go too nuts. There we go, popped it out just like that. See, so we just ran a screw through there, popped that plug out. So we're gonna repeat that process for all of these press-in plugs. So the only thing I'll mention here is you probably want to start with a smaller diameter screw. That way, if while you're doing this, you end up stripping out the plug, ripping the screw straight through the plug, you can then go to a larger diameter screw and that thing's not just stuck in there. Just gonna pop this hammer. There it goes. Up and out. I've got all my oil galley plugs out. I've got one that's giving me a problem. It's the one that feeds the rear main on the crank. So that one is gonna have to wait until I get the engine off the stand because it's right behind the bolt plate for the stand. The head's stripped out, so of course I had to have one of them that was gonna fight me. Now I'm gonna go ahead and remove the freeze plugs. So just take a punch up against the edge of the plug here. We're gonna tap it. So we get it to rotate like that. I'm gonna grab a pair of channel locks here. Pull the plug out, that simple. So we're gonna repeat the process on all the rest of the freeze plugs. And I knocked that one in the block, great. No issue though, we'll get it out of there. Go. Same problem there. That one wants to get knocked in too. Okay. Ooh, good amount of corrosion in here. This is going to be good to get this block cleared out. Oh, there's a lot of garbage in here. All right, all the freeze plugs are out. Look at this. All this corrosion thing. This block is plugged, almost clean plugged up. So it's good that we're doing this. We're gonna get all this corrosion knocked out of here. Get this block cleaned up real good. Okay, I got all of my galley plugs, my freeze plugs out. I'm gonna come in here with a die grinder and I'm gonna clean up a bunch of this casting flash that's in here. There's some on either side of these drain holes here. So I'm just gonna come in here and clean these up, and I'm gonna do the same thing with the front drain hole as well. Okay, so you can see how much better that looks. We didn't go too wild. We're not hogging the holes out big time. Just getting rid of the jagged edges of the casting flash that's on there. Same with this front hole. So I think the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come in and I'm going to tap all of our galley plugs for a 1/4 inch pipe plug. I got the oil galley plugs and the freeze plugs out of the block now. The next thing I was going to do was come in here to the lifter galley and tap where those plugs were for a 1/4 inch tap. Now I did this back hole, and being totally 100% honest, I wasn't crazy thrilled with the threads I put in there. I don't know if my tap's not hard enough for the cast iron. So it made me a little iffy on doing it. I think I'm going to hold off on tapping those, and I'm going to have the machine shop go ahead and tap those. It's just one of those situations where if I screw the threads up, there's not really any going back. So I kind of know my limitations on this one. But if you are someone who's confident in tapping those, go right on ahead and do it. I want to show you one other thing. You can see where this, if I get in close here, I think you can see where that tapers in, where that oil passage runs down to the lifters. You can see where it goes from like a 7/16 hole to a narrower hole in there. What I'm going to have the machine shop do is tap that smaller diameter for an 1/8 inch plug. We're going to drill like an 8 to 10 thousandth hole through that 1/8 inch plug and put it in there, and that's just going to help meter the oil going through that passage down to the lifters. It's dumping way more oil than is required for the lifters. So this is one of the common oiling modifications that I read about for FE blocks. It's just a little metering plug that reduces the quantity of oil going down to the lifters. Since we're not going to be doing that, I think the next thing I want to do, I'm going to flip the block over. I'm going to show you some modifications for the main bearings as well as the oil pump. I left the bearings in the block side, and what you'll notice in here is that the oil passage doesn't line up solely with the bearing. Most of the bearings, actually the bearing that I'm going to use is not going to have a center hole like this. It's going to have kind of like the 3/4 groove for the oiling surface. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark the center line of this groove, and I'm going to take my die grinder and I'm just going to take the edge off that just a little bit to bring it over just past the center line, or just to the outside of the center line here, to ensure that we're getting full oiling to the bearings. Now you'll notice in the third main and the back main, they're perfectly fine. No modification necessary. But in 1, 2, and 4, we're going to have to open that up just a little bit. What I've read is the weakness in these FE blocks can be cracking and kind of the main support here, the main bearing support here. So the other thing I'm going to do once with the die grinder out is you can see all this casting flash in here. We're just going to come in and clean all this up on all of the main webs here. We're going to clean a bunch of this casting flash up while I'm in there. So I'm going to take a marker and I'm going to come in here and I'm just going to mark right down the center line, because we don't want to go over, really want to go over. So this ones aren't too bad actually. I've seen much worse in these FE blocks. These are pretty well close to the center already. But I'm just going to taper that edge just a little bit. So really see that it's not much at all that we're taking out of there. And I'm going to grab a bearing here and stick it back in so you get the idea of what we accomplished with that. So imagine, instead of having this big hole here, imagine this center line is opened up, and you would see that we're getting oil all the way over. So I think I'm actually going to open that up just a hair more, not much. We're not really hogging a bunch of metal out of here. We're just opening that line up so when these other bearings are in there, we'll have full oiling to the center of the bearing. All right, and I went ahead and I switched my burr out for a slightly smaller one just so I have a little more control. We get a little more precision touch here, and I'm just going to take just a little bit more material out of there. Okay. That's it. We just open that up just a little bit. I'll slide this bearing back in. Yeah, so you can see along this edge here, our little chamfer runs all the way over to that edge, so we'll get nice oiling up through the center of that bearing when we put new bearings in. I'm going to repeat that for the 2 and 4 mains. Okay, so I'm going to bring you in here for a close look. So I can get this to focus in there. You can kind of see the edge of my thumbnail there is where that chamfer ends in there. So now we'll be able to get a full shot of oil up through the center of the bearing, even if we don't have these larger holes drilled in this bearing. If it's more of the 3/4 like galley style bearing. I've got that done in our 1, 2, and 4 main webs. The next thing I'm going to go to here is the oil pump modification. Now, this is a big modification that's pretty common for these FEs. I'm going to grab the old oil pump gasket here, and you can see the outline of it on the block, but I'm going to just show you. You can see the size of the hole in the block compared to the hole in the gasket. This is a huge restriction. Let me grab the oil pump real quick. So you can see the size difference in the hole of the between the hole in the block and the hole in the gasket, and then let's compare that to the oil pump, and you can see it's significantly different. Like, this is a much larger opening here. So our restriction comes from, we pump oil up through the oil pump to the block, and it severely gets restricted here. So we are going to gasket match this opening, and we're going to work the floor of this opening a little bit with round ball burr and the kind of the roof a little bit, so we get good oil flow up through the pump and then into the block. First thing I'm going to do here is just clean my surface up a little bit so I can see my marker. Now I'm going to grab my gasket and my marker, and I'm going to mark out this opening. So now we've got our mark in the block here of how we're going to kind of open this up. I'm going to start with this same tapered burr just to open up this hole in the shape I've got here, and then we'll come back and do some fine tuning with the smaller ball burr. Okay, so I left a little bit of meat on the bone. Didn't go too crazy with it. This is, when you look down, when you can actually see, if I'll show you in a minute here, but this opening is now much larger than the actual oil passage in the block, where before it was quite a bit smaller and it had a really sharp turn. So now I'm going to come in with a ball burr, and we're going to clean up the floor of that and round out the kind of the roof as well. So this is a ball burr. It's much smaller, and it's going to allow me to kind of shape the bottom bowl and the floor of this opening. All right, let's come in here and take a look. So now you can see this is much more rounded out, and all of the transitions down into the oiling passage in the block are rounded and smoothed over. So hopefully to keep that oil kind of flowing through there, rather than having sharp corners and rigid stops and restrictions where flow is going to be severely restricted. So now we're closer to gasket matched to our oil pump. We should get a higher volume of oil through the block, through the oil passage, and maintain better oil pressure in the block. Okay, so now that I've got the oil pump mod and the main oil passages opened up a little bit, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to work on the casting flash on the main webs, and then flip this over and do some of that casting flash in the lifter gallery as well as on the outside of the block. See, I came in here, I cleaned up all this casting flash. That's really just an aesthetic thing, so if you don't care about that, you don't really have to do that. But, you know, I think it does make the block look a lot cleaner, a lot nicer. We did that on both sides. You got the casting flash there. Let me crank this thing around so we can get a look at the block here. There was a ton of work in here. There's quite a bit of casting flash in there. So I cleaned all that up. That all looks way nicer. You can see on the main webs, I cleaned casting flash off of each side there. That all looks really good. So let's recap a little bit for this episode. What we did, we came in here, we opened up our main oiling bearing holes on 1, 2, and 4. We opened up the main we opened up the main oil pump hole here. We smoothed out that passage, gasket matched it closely. I left a little meat on the bone there. I didn't go too crazy to improve the oil volume going into the block. And then on our other side here, we got all of our oil galley plugs pulled. I was going to tap those on this video, but like I said, I wasn't overly confident in that process. I'd rather have a professional do it. You can see I got one plug tapped here. You're gonna have the same thing here, here, and here. One down in the distributor there. One up here in the front galley of this galley passage. These holes will be tapped to a 1/2-inch pipe thread where we will plug this hole, we will plug this hole, and then these 4 will have vent tubes on them. Additionally, inside of these back 2 passages, there will be a metering plug. It'll be an 1/8-inch pipe plug with an 8 to 10 thousandths hole drilled in it. And that's going to meter the oil that does come down into our lifter galley here. So I did get a set of Moroso brushes. These are cleaning brushes, specifically for cleaning out the oil galley and lifter bores and everything else. It's just a whole set of brushes here, nylon brushes. So what I'm gonna do next here, I'm gonna do one final wash and get all of the metal shavings from doing all that die grinding out of here. I'm gonna take my long brushes here and I'm actually gonna scrub out the oil galleys pretty well, because you can see I jam this in here and this will pass all the way through. Look, you can see how much gunk is already on there. because we know this thing didn't get a ton of oil changes, I'm going to use some detergent and get in here and scrub all these galleys out really good. Try and get any crud or crap that might be stuck in there out. See, this one goes all the way through. You can see, goes all the way through to the back, and you can see how much junk is on that brush already. So we're just gonna take this back outside, put some water in a bucket here, some detergent, and we're just gonna pass through these oil galleys. I'll scrub the cylinders out, I'll scrub the lifters out. We'll get everything good and clean for now, and then we will put one last coat of the penetrating oil all over the engine, and we'll bag it up, and we're basically ready to take this thing off to the machine shop. When it's at the machine shop, we're going to be getting the cylinders bored out, new cam bearings installed, our oil galleys tapped, probably a line hone, and having all the gasket surfaces resurfaced. And then we'll have them do a hot tank and clean this thing and make sure everything else is good to go. I'm gonna also have them check the lifter bore tolerances, see if they need to be honed or if they just need to be drilled and re-sleeved. So that's kind of the bulk of what needs to be done to the block that I'm gonna have the machine shop do. That's pretty much all I'm gonna have them do. Everything else, I'm gonna do all the assembly myself. So I'm gonna hopefully get this block up to a machine shop here in the next week or two. Who knows how long it'll be at the machine shop. I'm hoping it won't be more than a couple weeks. So in about a month's time, I'm hoping we'll be able to start reassembling this block. So we'll see. We got a long ways to go to get there, but I'm so excited because we're making progress. I haven't found anything really negative about this block yet. Of course, you know, there is a ton of corrosion inside the water passages, but short of that, I don't see any cracking, warping, anything of that nature. No signs of overheating or anything like that. Even the bearings, the main bearings were in surprisingly good shape for this thing having no oil in it for some period of time. Even if it was a short period of time, they weren't all melted and burn up. So all signs are pointing to this being a good block to build off of. But for now, I'm gonna go ahead and get this thing washed up, and we'll get it oiled up and bagged up. Well, I'm discovering stuff right up to the end here. I noticed I was spraying air through these oil passages here, and I was checking to make sure, because that passage runs through to the cam bearings, and I was checking to ensure that there was airflow, and all of them had pretty good airflow except for number 2. There wasn't hardly any air making its way through the cam bearing down here, the oil passage in the cam bearing. So I'm wondering if either that bearing is slightly spun or if we've got a blockage. But that is good information to have, because when I take this block to the machine shop, I'm going to be sure to tell them, hey, can you make sure you check that oil passage between the number 2 main and the number 2 cam bearing. So yeah, just finding stuff right up to the end here. The last thing I'm going to do, like I said, I've got my surface shield, my PB Blaster surface shield. I'm just going to spray down this block real good just to make sure we don't get any flash rusting in here. It's not going to hurt anything. It's just a mess when you're ready to start working on things again, but for now, better safe than sorry. Like I said, we'll just spray the whole block down here real good. I'm sure the machine shop is going to love that. All right, let's put her in her sleeping bag. thing's giant, way bigger than it needs to be, but that's all right. For now, I'm just going to leave the bottom side open too, because there is still a little moisture in there. Give it some place to escape to, and that's it. That's going to do it for today's episode, guys. It was a short little sweet one, but a lot of necessary steps that we had to take care of before we send this block out to the machine shop. Now, I'm really excited to get this thing off to the machine shop, have them do their work, get it back, and start building this power plant. I'm really looking forward to that. It's going to be a lot of fun. To all you guys watching at home, I got a full-time job. I'm here, I'm doing this on the weekends, I'm doing it a night a week. Just remember, you don't have to get your whole project done in a week. It doesn't have to happen in a month. Just chip away, chip away, chip away. That's what we're doing here. We are chipping away at this project. We're making progress. Every night we're in the shop, we're that much closer to finishing this project. That said, remember, if you don't work on your project, it will not work on itself, and we don't want that. We want your projects to get finished. So get out in the garage, get building, and I'll see you on the next episode of Cody Builds.